In the tranquil suburbs of Brussels, where life unfolded at a leisurely European pace, a young girl spent her childhood immersed in a world of ideas, languages, and the constant hum of political discussions. Her name was Ursula Gertrude von der Leyen, though at the time, no one could have foreseen that she would one day lead the European Commission, the very heart of the European Union. Before we delve into the main content, please consider subscribing to my channel, giving a like, leaving a comment, and sharing to support me in bringing more great videos to you. Thank you so much. Born in 1958, Ursula came from a family where public service was not merely a job, but a deeply ingrained tradition. Her father, Ernst Albrecht, was a prominent German politician who held influential positions long before the concept of unified Europe had even entered the minds of most people. As a result, Ursula's upbringing was steeped in conversations about governance, cooperation, and the future of Europe. Though, as a child, she likely perceived these discussions as simply the background noise of her home life. Her family frequently moved between Belgium, Germany, and other parts of Western Europe, allowing Ursula's childhood to unfold across borders, and instilling in her an early appreciation for linguistic and cultural diversity. She effortlessly navigated between French, German, and English, observing how Europeans, despite their disagreements, could still share a vision of belonging to something larger. These formative years quietly shaped her character, fostering a gentle yet determined spirit, an observant mind, and an unwavering confidence. She found joy in music, particularly the discipline of playing the piano. Her love for animals, especially horses, offered her a sense of freedom through riding, a stark contrast to the structured formality of her political home life. She excelled in her studies, admired profound thinkers, and absorbed the values of responsibility and service that permeated her environment. However, Ursula's path to leadership was far from straightforward. As she matured, she became increasingly aware of both the privileges and pressures that came with being the daughter of a prominent political figure. She attended prestigious schools and excelled academically, but she also harbored a strong desire to forge her own identity, one that extended beyond her father's legacy. It was perhaps during late-night study sessions or long afternoons spent riding horses across the fields of Lower Saxony that she felt a pull toward public service, though she didn't yet know how or when she would enter that world. In her early adulthood, Ursula initially pursued economics before turning to a more personal calling, medicine. She trained as a doctor, specializing in gynecology. Her years in medical school were characterized by long nights, challenging examinations, and profound responsibility of caring for patients. This experience provided her not only with scientific knowledge, but also with a deep sense of empathy, allowing her to witness firsthand challenges faced by women, the uncertainties of illness, and the quiet courage of those seeking care. This period grounded her, teaching her to listen intently, observe carefully, and balance emotion with practicality. Those who knew her during this time remember her as hard-working, composed, and deeply compassionate. It was also during these years that Ursula started her own family. She married Heiko von der Leyen, a medical professor, and together they would raise 7 children, a remarkable feat that combined parenthood with the demands of professional ambition. Ursula learned to gracefully navigate her roles as doctor, mother, and scholar. The world of politics remained in her memories, but it was still distant, patiently waiting. But life has a way of leading us back to our origins. By the 1990s, as Germany navigated reunification and Europe began to reimagine its future, Ursula felt an increasing pull toward public life. This wasn't driven by a desire for power, but by a growing conviction that she had something meaningful to contribute. Her diverse experiences, an international childhood, medical training, motherhood, and multilingualism, had given her a perspective broad enough to see Europe not as a collection of borders, but as a shared endeavor. She entered politics gradually, starting at the local level and steadily rising as her skills became apparent. In Lower Saxony, she served on committees dedicated to supporting families, women, and social development. She spoke with genuine sincerity, supported her ideas with data, and carried herself with a combination of warmth and determination that garnered attention. Her colleagues noted an unusual quality. Ursula didn't speak to impress. She spoke to understand. She asked questions, sought consensus, and maintained an unwavering composure even in heated discussions. This approach was rooted in her upbringing, shaped by the spirit of cooperation she had observed within European institutions as a child. By the late 1990s, Germany was undergoing significant social and economic transformations. Ursula emerged as a thoughtful voice, practical, composed, and driven by the belief that families and social infrastructure form the foundation of national strength. She steadily advanced through the ranks of the Christian Democratic Union, CDU, gaining both admirers and critics, as is inevitable for rising political figures. However, Ursula remained patient and deliberate, allowing her career to grow in tandem with her understanding of Europe's role in the world. Whether she was discussing childcare, health systems, or social policy, she consistently returned to the same core themes: dignity, unity, opportunity, and responsibility. By the early 2000s, Ursula's trajectory was clear. She was no longer simply the daughter of a politician or a doctor balancing family and career. She was becoming a leader in her own right, poised for roles that would profoundly influence German and European politics. Then came the pivotal moment that changed everything. In 2005, following a German election that ushered in a new government, Ursula von der Leyen was appointed Federal Minister for Family Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women, and Youth. This marked her first major national role, catapulting her into the spotlight and permanently intertwining her story with that of modern Europe. When Ursula von der Leyen entered the German federal cabinet in 2005, it signaled the start of a new chapter not only for her, but also for the political landscape of Europe. As she assumed the role of Federal Minister for Family Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women and Youth, Germany was navigating a period marked by economic uncertainty, social change, and evolving expectations regarding the future of work, family, and society. For Ursula, this was an opportunity to combine her medical background, her understanding of family life, and her belief in practical solutions into a cohesive mission. Her initial days in office were characterized by a careful and attentive approach. She engaged with experts, community leaders, educators, and social workers. She visited kindergartens, elderly care centers, and women's organizations, listening quietly and patiently, absorbing every detail. Those who collaborated with her observed a consistent pattern. Ursula didn't rush to conclusions. Instead, she built them from the ground up, piecing together stories, data, and perspectives with the precision of a doctor diagnosing a complex case. One of her immediate priorities was addressing Germany's declining birth rate. Policymakers had debated ways to support young families for years, but progress had been slow. Ursula believed the solution lay in fostering an environment where children were seen not as a burden, but as a natural part of a balanced and supported life. She advocated for expanded parental leave benefits, improved childcare infrastructure, and policies designed to help women return to the workforce without having to sacrifice motherhood. Her proposals ignited debates across the country, with traditionalists raising concerns about the shift and progressives embracing it. Ursula, however, remained focused on the people rather than the political noise. In interviews, she often spoke with calm sincerity about the realities of family life: late-night feedings, long workdays, financial pressures, and the need for support systems. These were subjects she understood intimately, not just as a policymaker, but as a mother of 7. Her reforms transformed Germany's family policy. Parental allowance programs were expanded, child care centers increased, and societal attitudes toward working parents gradually began to shift. For many families, Ursula's initiatives provided the foundation they needed to pursue both career and family without feeling caught in the middle. Her work in this ministry also revealed a key aspect of her character. Ursula viewed politics not as a matter of ideology, but as an act of service. She approached reforms like a builder, assessing the strength of each pillar. And while political debates raged around her, she maintained a steady composure, polite, focused, and firm when necessary. In 2009, Ursula's responsibilities grew when she was appointed Federal Minister of Labor and Social Affairs, one of the most demanding positions in the German government. This transition occurred at a critical time, as Europe was still grappling with the aftermath of the global financial crisis, and unemployment was a major concern. Germany, with its industrial base and export-driven economy, needed stability. Ursula met the challenge with her characteristic discipline. She strengthened job training programs, supported the digitalization of workplaces, and expanded opportunities for the long-term unemployed. She collaborated with businesses, labor unions, and regional authorities to ensure that reforms didn't overlook vulnerable groups. She also tackled pension reforms, a sensitive topic in a country with a large aging population, approaching it with a blend of logic and empathy, balancing fiscal responsibility with the dignity of workers who had dedicated decades to contributing to society. During these years, Ursula developed a reputation that extended beyond Germany's borders. Other European leaders took note of her practical approach and her ability to communicate complex issues with clarity. Her bilingual upbringing allowed her to move seamlessly across languages and cultures at international meetings, where she often spoke about balancing economic growth with social responsibility. Meanwhile, Europe was undergoing its own transformations, with debates over migration, economic integration, and the direction of the European Union filling newspapers and parliaments. Ursula observed these developments from her position in Berlin, becoming increasingly aware that Germany's future was inextricably linked to Europe's. By 2013, another shift was on the horizon. Angela Merkel, then Chancellor of Germany, reshuffled the cabinet and appointed Ursula von der Leyen as Federal Minister of Defense. This was a surprising move for many, especially in a country where defense issues carried historical weight and public sensitivity. Ursula became the first woman to ever hold the position. The appointment was more than symbolic. It represented a significant test of leadership. The German military, the Bundeswehr, was facing aging equipment, recruitment challenges, and increased responsibilities within NATO. Ursula approached the ministry with her usual thoroughness. She visited bases across the country, spoke with soldiers and officers, and personally inspected troop housing and equipment. Her objective was clear: modernization, dignity, and preparedness. She pushed for better infrastructure for soldiers, improved family accommodations for military families, and updated equipment. She emphasized the importance of digital security, recognizing early on that future conflicts would unfold not only on land or sea, but also in cyberspace. She also emerged as a prominent voice in discussions about European defense cooperation, advocating for greater unity and shared responsibility. Ursula's leadership style in the defense ministry combined firmness with empathy. She demanded accountability from officials, but also listened to soldiers' concerns about long deployments and inadequate support. She made decisions that required courage, and at times sparked controversy. But through every challenge, she continued to articulate a vision of a stronger, more unified European defense posture. By the late 2010s, Ursula von der Leyen had become one of the most recognizable figures in German politics. She had held some of the most demanding ministerial roles and navigated crises with unwavering steadiness. Her name began to appear more and more frequently in European discussions, mentioned in debates about leadership, cooperation, and the future of the EU. Then came the moment that would alter her path once again. In 2019, following intense negotiations among EU member states, Ursula von der Leyen was nominated for presidency of the European Commission, the executive branch of the European Union. This position would place her at the center of global diplomacy, economic strategy, climate transition, and the future identity of the European continent. When Ursula von der Leyen walked into the Parliament, the iconic glass building that houses the European Commission, in late 2019, she entered not only a new office, but an entirely new realm of responsibility. Brussels had been part of her childhood, but returning as president of the European Commission was different. The hallways felt familiar, yet they carried a weight she had never felt before. The EU's challenges were immense, encompassing climate change, digital transformation, economic uncertainty, migration, and the fragile unity of a continent shaped by centuries of triumph and conflict. The European Union is not a single country. It's a mosaic, a delicate structure built on negotiation, compromise, and shared purpose. Leading its executive branch required more than just ambition. It demanded trust, vision, and sensitivity to the diverse realities of 27 nations. Ursula's first days reflected precisely that. She spent countless hours meeting with commissioners, diplomats, policy teams, and advisors from across Europe. She listened intently as they described the struggles of different regions. Shrinking rural communities in Eastern Europe, energy transitions in the North, migration pressures in the South, and financial anxieties in the West. She moved from room to room with her signature blend of calm concentration and quiet determination. One of her earliest priorities was a European Green Deal, an ambitious program aimed at transforming Europe into the first climate-neutral continent by 2050. She believed that climate change was not just an environmental challenge, but also an economic one, an opportunity to reshape industries, modernize infrastructure, and create new sources of growth. She spoke about green energy, sustainable agriculture, clean transport, and innovation as if weaving together threads of a new European identity. Her speeches conveyed clarity and steadiness. She often referred to the Green Deal as Europe's man on the moon moment, a phrase that captured both the scale of the challenge and the collective spirit she hoped to inspire. While some leaders welcomed her boldness, others expressed concerns about the cost. However, Ursula pressed forward, convinced that Europe needed to lead by example. Another major pillar of her agenda was digital transformation. She envisioned a Europe that was technologically independent, innovative, and secure. Data privacy, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and fair competition became central themes of her early tenure. She wanted Europe to be a global leader not only in regulation, but also in innovation, to develop its own technology ecosystems and avoid dependence on external powers. Then came the unexpected. In early 2020, the first signs of a new virus emerged, initially distant, but gradually spreading across borders, airports, and cities. Like many world leaders, Ursula watched the reports with growing concern. But when COVID-19 reached Europe in full force, the continent found itself facing a crisis unlike any it had encountered in modern times. Within weeks, hospitals were overwhelmed, supply chains ground to a halt, and entire nations went into lockdown. Streets that once echoed with multilingual conversations fell silent. Schools, restaurants, cafes, and workplaces closed. Europe, long accustomed to open borders and free movement, experienced internal travel restrictions, empty train stations, and grounded flights. Ursula's leadership was immediately put to the test. The European Union had never dealt with a crisis that was so sudden and so deeply intertwined with every sector of society. While public health was primarily a national responsibility, the virus moved without regard for national boundaries. Ursula recognized that unity, not fragmentation, would determine the continent's ability to respond. She convened emergency meetings, activated crisis response teams, and coordinated with leaders of all member states. She listened to scientists, public health experts, and logistics specialists. She spoke with the heads of pharmaceutical companies, vaccine researchers, and international partners. Her days became a constant cycle of calls, briefings, negotiations, and decisions. However, the crisis was not just medical. It was also emotional. Across Europe, families worried about loved ones, workers lost their jobs, and communities felt the fear of isolation. Ursula addressed the public in calm, steady tones, sometimes from her office, sometimes through video messages filmed late at night. She spoke about solidarity, about caring for the vulnerable, and about finding hope in collective action. During this time, the EU faced harsh realities, shortages of protective equipment, fragmented national responses, and rising frustration. Ursula openly acknowledged the challenges but insisted that Europe must move forward together, not separately. Slowly, coordination improved. Supplies were shared, medical teams were deployed across borders, and the transportation of essential goods was protected. Then came one of the most significant political decisions in modern EU history, a joint European recovery fund. For years, proposals for shared economic tools had met resistance. Yet, the pandemic changed everything. Ursula championed an unprecedented plan, borrowing collectively at the EU level to create a massive fund that would support the countries hit hardest by the crisis. This required delicate diplomacy, careful persuasion, and countless hours of negotiation with skeptical member states. But she persisted. When the plan was finally approved, it marked a turning point. Europe had taken a collective economic step that was once thought unimaginable. While it didn't solve every problem, it demonstrated that unity was still possible in times of fear and uncertainty. Meanwhile, Ursula also pushed forward a coordinated vaccine strategy. She believed that each member state should not compete individually for doses. Instead, they should negotiate together. Critics questioned the pace. But Ursula remained steadfast, convinced that equitable access mattered more than political expediency. By late 2021, Europe had administered millions of vaccines and shared doses globally. Throughout these months, Ursula's leadership style became more visible than ever. Patient, data-driven, empathetic, and relentlessly committed to cooperation. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't seek applause. She led through persistence, a form of strength that was quieter than force, but equally powerful. As Europe cautiously emerged in the shadows of the pandemic, the continent found itself transformed, altered not only by loss, but also by a renewed sense of urgency. When Ursula von der Leyen walked again to the glass corridors of Berlin in 2021, the echoes of the crisis still lingered, yet beneath them lay the beginnings of recovery. Her task as president of the European Commission was no longer simply to manage a continent in crisis, but to help rebuild it, stronger, greener, more digital, and more prepared for a world undergoing profound change. The first challenge was implementing the Recovery and Resilience Facility, the historic economic package agreed upon during the darkest months of the pandemic. Ursula moved from meeting to meeting, reviewing national plans, evaluating proposed reforms, and ensuring that money would flow not as a temporary relief, but as an investment in Europe's future. She emphasized a simple principle: the recovery must not restore the old world, but build a better one. Her speeches during this period carried a tone of measured hope. She often spoke about a Europe that rises together, infusing her words with the idea that collective strength mattered more than ever. She reminded leaders that Europe's unity during the pandemic, however imperfect, had been its greatest asset. Much of Ursula's energy shifted toward climate ambition, the heart of her mandate. The European Green Deal, once a visionary plan, was now a roadmap for renewal. Renewable energy projects accelerated. Solar and wind farms expanded across the continent. Hydrogen strategy platforms emerged. Leaders debated emissions targets, energy transitions, and sustainable industry with a new intensity. The pandemic had revealed weaknesses, but it had also clarified priorities. For Ursula, climate policy wasn't just about the environment. It was about economic transformation, technological leadership, and security. She pushed for the Fit for 55 package, a bold set of legislative actions to reduce emissions by 55% before 2030. Some member states worried about cost and pace, while others urged even greater ambition. Ursula again became the mediator, the calm voice guiding 27 nations toward a shared horizon. But even as Europe focused on rebuilding, the world outside grew more turbulent. In early 2022, global attention shifted abruptly when conflict erupted between Russia and Ukraine. For Ursula, it was a moment that struck at the very heart of Europe. She knew the geography, understood the history, and recognized the magnitude of what was unfolding. The invasion shocked the continent, challenging long-held assumptions about security, stability, and the post-war European order. Suddenly, Ursula found herself at the epicenter of decisions that would define Europe's role in the 21st century. The EU moved quickly, faster than many expected. Ursula coordinated sanctions packages against Russia, each more comprehensive than the last. The discussions were intense, emotional at times, and required careful diplomacy. She spoke with presidents, prime ministers, finance ministers, and energy leaders daily. She reminded them that Europe's response would send a message, not only to Russia but to the world, about its commitment to sovereignty and democracy. At the same time, she worked to address the continent's growing reliance on Russian energy. Years of dependence were now exposed as a vulnerability. Ursula announced plans for diversification, renewable acceleration, and stronger energy security. The REPowerEU plan emerged as a blueprint to reshape Europe's energy landscape, reducing dependence on external suppliers, and accelerating the adoption of clean energy. Throughout this period, Ursula became an increasingly visible presence on the global stage. She visited Kiev multiple times, walking through war-damaged streets with a calm but resolute expression. She met with Ukrainian officials, comforted civilians, and delivered messages of European solidarity. Her presence carried symbolic weight. Europe was not turning its back. Within the Commission, her days were a constant cycle of crisis management and long-term planning. She balanced humanitarian needs with economic stability, sanctions with diplomacy, and defense coordination with energy reform. She consulted with military experts, economists, environmental scientists, and humanitarian organizations. Each decision required precision and empathy. Meanwhile, Europe faced its own internal pressures. Energy prices surged. Inflation rose. Households felt the strain. Ursula spoke candidly about these challenges, but insisted that Europe could overcome them through unity. She coordinated price caps, consumer protections, and support for vulnerable households. Even as geopolitical tensions dominated headlines, Ursula never allowed Europe to lose sight of its long-term ambitions. Digital transformation continued. Plans for semiconductor production, data protection, artificial intelligence regulation, and technological independence moved forward. She spoke frequently about strategic autonomy, the idea that Europe must be strong enough to defend its values, economy, and technological future without becoming dependent on external powers. Her leadership style evolved during these years. The crisis revealed a firmer, more decisive Ursula, still calm, still composed, but increasingly bold. She addressed parliaments with clarity. She engaged global leaders with confidence. She fostered unity during European Council summits, often serving as a quiet bridge between differing positions. By late 2023, Europe had entered a new phase, still fragile, but more aware of its identity. The EU had become more assertive, more strategic, and more visible in global affairs. Ursula had become one of the most recognized political figures of the era, a symbol of resilience, cooperation, and European resolve. And yet, she remained grounded in the simple truth she learned in childhood. Europe is a mosaic. Its strength lies not in uniformity, but in the ability to move forward together despite differences. As Europe entered the mid-2020s, the continent found itself confronted not by a single crisis, but by a shifting landscape of challenges and opportunities. The world was becoming faster, more competitive, and more uncertain. For Ursula von der Leyen, standing at the helm of the European Commission, the task was no longer simply to react to emergencies. It was to help shape a Europe capable of thriving in an era of transformation. The scars of the pandemic and the shockwaves of the war in Ukraine remained visible. Families still felt the weight of inflation. Businesses grappled with supply chain shifts. Governments navigated complex alliances. And yet, beneath all this, a sense of momentum quietly grew. Europe was learning to adapt, to innovate, to collaborate, and to rediscover its voice on the global stage. Ursula began focusing on what she called Europe's strategic future. Her speeches became less about crisis response and more about long-term vision. She spoke of a Europe that must stand confidently between global powers, not as a follower, but as a shaper of the world. She emphasized three pillars: climate leadership, technological sovereignty, and democratic resilience. The first pillar remained deeply rooted in the European Green Deal. By the mid-2020s, renewable energy had become central to Europe's identity. Large wind farms expanded across the North Sea. Solar fields spread across the Mediterranean. Hydrogen valleys arose in Germany, the Netherlands, and Spain. The very landscape of Europe was undergoing a profound transformation. Ursula passionately urged member states to maintain their commitment, emphasizing that achieving climate neutrality wasn't merely an environmental aspiration, but a cornerstone of long-term economic prosperity. She posited that those nations leading the charge in the green transition would inevitably spearhead the next industrial revolution, shaping the future of global economies. Her message, delivered with both calm assurance and unwavering resolve, was clear. Europe must progress forward, not regress. The second critical pillar, technological sovereignty, became increasingly pressing. Global competition in key technological arenas like artificial intelligence, semiconductor development, cloud infrastructure, and cybersecurity was intensifying dramatically. The world was rapidly transitioning into an era where data reigned supreme, algorithms wielded significant influence over societies, and information itself could be deployed as both a powerful tool and a formidable weapon. Ursula championed the implementation of forward-thinking regulations concerning AI, digital markets, and cybersecurity. Furthermore, she actively encouraged collaboration between European universities, burgeoning startups, and established industries to cultivate robust ecosystems capable of competing effectively with the world's leading tech hubs. The EU Chips Act provided crucial support for the establishment of new semiconductor plants, with the overarching goal of diminishing Europe's reliance on foreign suppliers. However, Ursula was acutely aware of the human dimension of technology. She frequently reminded audiences that technological innovation must always be aligned with fundamental European values, namely privacy, fairness, and transparency. Her vision wasn't one of Europe merely trying to catch up with existing technological giants, but rather of Europe setting the global gold standard for responsible technological development. The third essential pillar, democratic resilience, gained prominence as the world became increasingly polarized. The proliferation of disinformation campaigns, foreign interference attempts, and extremist rhetoric pose a significant threat to the stability of open, democratic societies. Ursula advocated for stronger protections for media, robust digital literacy programs, and reinforced safeguards for electoral processes. She stressed that democracy should not be taken for granted, but instead required constant vigilance and proactive nurturing. While Ursula dedicated significant attention to Europe's internal evolution, she also maintained a keen focus on the external landscape. On a global scale, competition between major world powers intensified. Economic alliances experienced shifts and realignments. The frequency and severity of climate-related disasters increased, and technological advancements continued to reshape geopolitical dynamics. Amidst these complex and often turbulent conditions, Europe sought to position itself not as a battleground for competing influences, but as a proactive force promoting balance, fostering international cooperation, and ensuring global stability. Ursula engaged in frequent international travel, holding discussions on critical issues such as trade, climate change, technological innovation, and security in meetings from Washington to Tokyo and from Delhi to Nairobi. Her presence became a familiar sight at global summits, a composed and reliable voice advocating for collaborative partnerships while steadfastly defending Europe's strategic interests. One of her most noteworthy achievements during this period was the strengthening of partnerships within the Indo-Pacific region. While Europe had long recognized the importance of Asia, these relationships were now deepened through digital trade agreements, collaborative green technology projects, and enhanced maritime security cooperation. Ursula often characterized the Indo-Pacific region as the heartbeat of global growth and emphasized that Europe must play an active role in shaping its future trajectory. Concurrently, the EU continued to provide steadfast support to Ukraine, offering humanitarian aid, financial assistance, and ongoing reconstruction planning. Ursula's visits to Kiev carried significant symbolic weight. She toured newly reconstructed neighborhoods, met with families who were rebuilding their homes, and reaffirmed Europe's unwavering commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty and its eventual integration into the European family. Her tone during these visits was noticeably more subdued and personal than in her formal speeches, almost reflective. Back in Brussels, the day-to-day work of governance continued. Ursula led discussions on crucial policy areas, such as energy reforms, new migration frameworks, agricultural strategies, and digital innovation. She leveraged her diverse background, medical, political, and diplomatic, to effectively balance competing interests and bridge areas of disagreement. Her leadership style was characterized not by dramatic pronouncements, but by a deliberate and measured approach. She favored steady progress over abrupt or radical changes. By the mid-2020s, Europe found itself at a critical juncture. It had successfully weathered a series of crises, identified new strengths, and come to terms with emerging vulnerabilities. Citizens engaged in robust debates about the appropriate pace of green reforms, the evolving role of technology in society, and the overall shape of Europe's global identity. Markets experienced fluctuations. Alliances underwent transformations. But Ursula consistently reiterated one core message: Europe must remain united. For her, unity wasn't merely a political concept, but a deeply ingrained conviction rooted in her own lived experience, having grown up in a multilingual and multicultural environment. She often emphasized that Europe's strength lies in its ability to reach compromises without sacrificing its overall direction and core values. This fundamental belief guided her through every negotiation, every late-night meeting, and every address to the European Parliament. As Ursula's current term drew closer to its conclusion, speculation inevitably arose concerning her future. Would she seek to continue in her role, step aside, or transition to another prominent position on the global stage? These questions circulated in Brussels cafes, within diplomatic circles, and throughout newsrooms. However, Ursula herself remained steadfastly focused on the tasks at hand. Her days were filled with the routine demands of leadership, reviewing briefing notes, conducting diplomatic calls, attending international summits, and participating in internal discussions. Yet, she maintained the same calm determination she had exhibited since her earliest ministerial role in Germany. She understood that leadership is not a destination to be reached, but an ongoing act of responsibility to be embraced. Part 5 ends not with definitive conclusion, but with a horizon of open possibilities. Ursula von der Leyen's story, shaped by her childhood travels, her medical training, her extensive political service, and her comprehensive global vision, remains inextricably linked to the unfolding story of Europe itself. The continent continues to evolve, striking a delicate balance between tradition and transformation, caution and ambition. And somewhere within the Berlaymont building, behind the reflective glass panels that mirror the ever-changing European sky, Ursula continues her vital work, helping guide a union of nations through a century defined by uncertainty, immense possibility, and constant reinvention. The narrative remains open-ended, because history itself is still being written.